Everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you, sharing ideas in the collective. There is a lot of change happening right now in our world, as you know about. And so speaking of that change, and Kirsten used the right word, sometimes it is messy and sometimes it's about what we call adaptive capacity and being able to pivot and being able to truly adapt as an organization, as individuals. Thank you, Nikki, for that layout of individual health and self-care, because it really is similar to organizational self-care as well. And I speak a lot about organizational health, and I borrow a lot of ideas and concepts from my guru, who's Patrick Lencioni. In a lot of books, he talks about the key is organizational health. But in particular, when you're getting something existential like this phenomenon that we're in, it's important organizations are really able to assess with clarity and really try to speak to the needs of where they're at now and use this time to position to be healthy in the crisis, but also be positioned for success coming out of this. And so right now, to borrow a Dr. Fauci term, they're calling it rolling reentry. And I love that terminology about how we're going back into a new world post this phenomenon. And you notice I'm not using the words coronavirus or COVID-19 intentionally. I'm calling it something different because I'm going to speak to that about communications in a minute and why that vernacular is important. But I think at the beginning, and I'm wondering, can I share my screen, Kirsten? So
I believe you can at the bottom.
Are you able to? Otherwise, Tanaka, maybe we can make him co-host.
Yep.
Yeah, it says there's another participant sharing, but if I can pull that up in a minute, I'll share with you a document. But while we're working on that, ultimately, nonprofit organizations, and since I know many of you are muted, normally I would ask a question to get a response. How many of you have crisis management plans already in place? And if you don't, I think now is the perfect time to start thinking what that looks like, because there's always going to be business disruption in our lives to some degree. And I think now it's about figuring out what the communication strategy, how do we assess our programming? How do we assess our funding approach in this situation that we find ourselves? And being on some calls recently, there was a call this past week with a global funder. They're suspending all their traditional funding. They're moving to what they're calling gap funding. That was spoken by earlier of Pam and emergency grants. And I think a lot of funders, this happened similar. I was at the Office Depot Foundation in the wake of the 2008 crash. And we were radically shifting traditional funding over into emergency grant relief. And I think that's the space you want to think about in creating your needs assessment document of what are our needs? How are we then positioning ourselves with our activities, program offerings, outcome measures for this time that we find ourselves? So I'm going to attempt to share my screen now with one particular document. And this is from a client that gave me permission to share this document. I want to expand it a little bit. So this is the Motivational Ledge. It's a client that we're working with out of Miami-Dade County, and they do some amazing work with a lot of at-risk youth, a lot of kids that are in foster care programs and services facing a lot of challenges right now. And they're actually serving, and they got permission as an essential needs organization to house a certain population of kids there at the campus now, practicing social distancing, all the protocols. But they have specific needs, and they put together this 2-page document that I would encourage you all to consider of what that is. And really the first part is really just the overview of services being offered. And it talks about who they are, it introduces them, but it doesn't get into their traditional program offerings. It speaks to what they're doing now in this time of uncertainty, destabilization, and how they're using and leveraging mental health counseling and staff. And that's important because we're going to talk about that in a minute when we get into creation of impact funds or emergency funds, because then this is the actual case for support, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So this talks about the collaborative planning, how they're going to offer these essential services. And I'm going to spend a lot of time walking through this, just the headers really. So it's looking at who is being served, the timing, and it speaks to the need, transportation, hot meals, healthy meals, the program impact, the anticipated outcomes, and they actually put together a program budget of what the utilization of these funds would look like. They've created what I'll show you in another document in a moment. their new hashtag campaign and their impact fund. And that's their gap goal. And it's right now for this particular funder was $30,000 going toward a total goal of $75,000. But this allows you to start to see, and any funder, institutional funder, even individuals, that this is what the needs are right now for the next 90 to 180 days. And I think that really is the timeline and the focus. As the dust settles, we'll understand more of what the world is going to look like each week, each month going forward. But I think if you think about it from a 90 to 180 day perspective, then you can kind of get your arms around it. Your donors can have clarity because ambiguity is the enemy right now.
Oh,
clarity.
woo! Love that.
Yes, yes, indeed. And I was on a call with clients earlier this week, and some of them said, well, we've been reaching out to family and friends on behalf of the nonprofit, but they're saying there's so much need out there. What are your needs? And I said, but they didn't have specific case. So they're just going to get random donations. The more that you can tie it with specificity, saying, here's our particular need, whether it's around counselors, mental health instructors, teaching artist instructors, food, transportation costs, then people can give to those elements because they see an immediate need being delivered with an immediate price tag on it, if you will. So I'm going to share one more.
Christopher, can I ask you a quick question? What are they calling that document, just so we have an idea?
Yes.
What would you call it?
Yes, so vernacular is very important right now more than ever, and I'm big on language. So this is what we're calling a needs statement.
Okay.
So it's a 2-page needs statement that speaks to all of these critical areas. And really, for those of you, and I know you have the grant divas here, they're used to seeing this kind of breakdown of the problem statement of needs, the outcomes anticipated, excuse me, and kind of the actual deliverables of what that would look like. That really makes up the focus and format of the needs statement.
I love it. Feel free to jump in the chat if anyone has any comments or questions while Dr. No pulls up the next document.
Exactly. We love Q&A. So
Yep.
This is the Motivational Ledge Emergency 90-Day Crisis Needs Blueprint. And this is a document that was put together for a few different audiences. Not only for their board, and I'll talk about their board in a moment, because that's a critical audience. They need to be led into what is the blueprint, what is the crisis management strategy that we're going to focus on, how are we pivoting, what does it look like, and so what is the approach in terms of who we're reaching and the communication structure. This speaks to, and these are the different headers: adapting to change, our need, why now, the goal, and again, it's around $75,000 in 90 days. And I will tell you, they're already well into $30,000 that they've received so far. They've got another 30 that's coming in that may be matched. So they were very proactive and hit the ground running because they knew that they have a critical target vulnerable population that they have to get these resources in for. They actually broke it down of what their cost per child looks like. And if they have about 30 identified children in this particular category, it's about $2,500 per child with that whole budget of all those costs on the needs statement, the teaching artist, mental health counseling, transportation, hot meals. And that is really what builds that budget. Now, this is where we get creative and innovative. So if you put out what a lot of nonprofits do historically, and even during this crisis, donate here. And I'm kind of one who's an advocate for, you need to shape the path, we call it, for donors, investors, and supporters of your nonprofit with innovative language that allows them, if you just say donate here, that gets into what I still say is ambiguous. If you say help us get funds for mental health counselors, for independent living, for academic achievement gap, these are ideas. Ultimately, we decided to go with one particular fund for them and one hashtag called the Edge Cares Fund. And that really allows them to brand it, to be strategic, to have it on their social media platforms with that consistent theme. They're actually ordering t-shirts for a lot of their folks who will be donating, and then to make it into a true branded campaign. So, and they have on the t-shirts, essential services, essential staff. And I think that is something that for a small group that will have those shirts, that's key. That's also psychological help. in terms of we're in this together. We are essential. We are all leaning in and engaging. This speaks to some of their strategy about who's going to be involved. Their community of donors, supporters, the Edge visionaries, that's their group of kind of their advisory board. And I think the messaging is going to be critical, and that's their PR strategy. And Kirsten, stop me anytime if there's questions.
I do have a quick question for you. First one is, who are they reaching out to share this blueprint and need statement with, and how are they initiating that contact, Dr. No?
So initially, this was an early draft for us internally. This was the language that we wanted to have for us to get our arms around. What is the need? What is the actual state of all that is going to be undertaken to deal with this?
Mm-hmm.
Of young people they're serving. And primarily it was for internal staff and the board as to our approach. We've since refined this and sent it to some funders as supplemental when we're with that need statement to let them know we have an internal document that's guiding and shaping to all of this, kind of moves management, if you will, to borrow a term. Because then it's about collecting success stories in this process that are media ready. They've already received some media from this, what we call earned media. They're not paying for this media. The media came to them because they recognize they're doing something in a crisis for a very vulnerable group of young people who, some of these kids, the 3 of them ran away from a center the other day because they're traumatized. They don't know what's going on. They're in foster care, many of this population. A couple of them were getting Baker Acted just so they could go to these centers to play video games. So it's like a whole nother different dynamic of that kind of audience, that target population they're trying to serve. So the key to that is trying to say, how are they part of the solution? So when they go to the mayor's office for funding, when they go to their the Children's Trust in Miami-Dade, or other partners, they can say, we have a blueprint for success. Here's the specifics with tight parameters and scope to the work. Otherwise, if it's just give us money, then it's unknown, and that's the ambiguity. Everything that I'm speaking to today is underscored with the word of specificity. You really have to be specific in what your plan and approach is. The distribution plan, this talks about, being strategic versus motion. So you don't want to just put a lot of stuff out on social media saying donate to this nonprofit. Everything needs to be tied to strategy and then the right tactics with it. And that is really thinking about what are the best platforms of delivery. Is it social media, traditional Instagram, Facebook, or is it a dedicated YouTube channel to allow you to reach new audiences? So when you get into how we're managing this, and this is what I'm doing work with other clients around 3 major areas: communications, programs, and funding. And communications is going to be critical. And I can share with you a couple of ideas.
Can I ask you a really quick question, Christopher, while you take the biggest gulp out of that big gulp that ever existed on the planet? Yeah.
Staying hydrated. Thanks to Nikki.
Is that a rum and Coke, or is that, okay, just checking.
Yeah, exactly.
So is this document shareable, or a version of it, maybe a template, just some sort of roadmap that we could offer to our participants? Do you think that might be possible?
Yeah, for anyone on this call or anyone else, then I can have these sent to you, Kirsten, for distribution.
Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yes. And, there's another document that I have that's kind of similar to this one, and it focuses on these three buckets, if you will, 3 categories. The first one is going to be, I think, the most critical. It's communications. I know a lot of nonprofits would say it's about funding. I would argue it's about communications first. Communications, the messaging, and I would say in this 90-day period from April through June 30th, and that really is the 90-day period I'm talking about, is what is the messaging starting out from the CEO or board president? What does that look like in terms of, I'm sure you've all gotten emails from JetBlue, Staples, all these companies talking about, things that they're doing to be proactive in this crisis. I think that is very critical, because you want to have it come from the leadership of the nonprofit, that we're being very proactive, we're staying relevant, we're staying current. And I think creating a messaging calendar is critical. When do the communiques drop? In the first I would say really in a series of 3 to 7 communiques to start thinking through. And that is from the CEO, this is where we are, this is where we find ourselves. And then the second one could talk about, we're launching things virtually. We're doing things with new platform learning. Beatty Museum is an African-American museum in Delray Beach. Their CEO is doing this. They're actually putting some stuff online on YouTube. She's going to get in her car instead of, they can't do the trolley tours anymore. So she's actually going to get in her car and actually go around and do a historical tour and record herself doing it and send that out.
Love it.
That's new ways to reach new audiences.
I love it.
And then the other is newsletters. You know, what is the messaging? How are you engaging? And the social media content as well.
Mm-hmm.
When it gets to programs, then it's about adapting. How are you adapting? Traditional programs may be suspended, but what does new program look like virtually? Online learning tools, recording Zoom meetings. One client, they're going to be doing interviews on Zoom and recording that and sending that out. So I think there's a lot of new ways to reach new audiences that will come from this.
Yep, I agree.
The other is the funding, and this is kind of the last category. Are there impact funds that you can get creative with, like the Edge Cares Fund? What vernacular do you use to describe them? What hashtag are you going to put with it? And does it speak to specific financial needs for the budget for this 90-day period? So that's it in a nutshell. I covered a lot of ground. I'll open it up for Q&A and then hear what innovative ideas and approaches you guys have.
I love all of this. Fantastic. What do you all think? Do you all have comments or thoughts on this? Isn't it great to have something sort of tangible to look at that someone's actually doing, that we can actually, you know, work from and get ideas from? I think it's phenomenal. Thank you. Yeah, Sarah says, thank you so much, Dr. No.
Yeah.
Who else? Does anyone else have any questions on this?
And my question is to the group, what communication strategies have you put in place? Have you laid out a messaging calendar and whom it's going to come from? Board chair, the CEO, and what kind of message? And I know that some other national experts we've been on webinars with have talked about, don't be treating fundraising as usual, you know, kind of the suspension of major gift giving, planned giving, capital campaigns, that's kind of back burner. It's now about the gap funding that you're looking to fulfill and the specific needs for this 90-day to 180-day window.
All right, we have a question. How involved should the board be in developing this interim 90-day plan, thinking about time and everyone's availability?
That's a beautiful question. I'm so glad I was asked, because I will tell you, 2 of my clients are having board calls on Zoom every 2 weeks now. Some of them would meet just quarterly, or some of them would just meet bi-monthly. Now they're moving to every 2 weeks. They're really leaning in, they're really engaging. They're forming task forces around either communications programs and or the funding aspect, so that they're not putting all this burden on staff. They're actually stepping up, because then they're part of this narrative going forward. They're going to be scripted. So when you take your top 25 donors and you say, can you call them? Then the board has specifics and knowledge, intimate knowledge of what's happening in that 90-day period, that they can have those healthy conversations with those donors.
That's right.
And some of those conversations are not just about asking for dollars. It's just saying, hey, we're on the radar, we're staying relevant, here's what we're doing. Stay tuned for a lot of stuff that's coming via Zoom recordings, YouTube uploads. I will tell you 2 other quick examples. Beatty Museum, I mentioned, they're going to do something called 30-second Beatty and have different people and influencers throughout the years that have been involved with them do a 30-second video of why Beatty is important to them. So that's one concept, and that kind of stuff creates, everyone can do that. Kids, families, donors, supporters.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to read a couple of these comments and observations. Dave Charlton, who's in North Carolina with Bounty and Soul, we're doing a lot of these things, but it's a week-by-week process. Banu Devi from One Eleuthera Foundation in the Bahamas in the house. Thank you for being here, Banu. She says they've done a lot of things, a lot of this at the One Eleuthera Foundation. Messaging came from the CEO primarily. Monica, yes, we are going to have a version of this available that you can access and use as a guideline. Pam Perrin asked if we should be communicating tax benefits. That's a good question.
Yeah, so I think the approach is really, it's about the focus right now on the need. If you want to try to incentivize donors to give in many ways, that is certainly an aspect or an element. But I think right now it's about demonstrating first and foremost, the primary need with a lot of specificity, being very specific, and then the outcomes of what all this good work and collective effort and goodwill will lead to for the populations being served. But yeah, to have a hook with the tax benefits, that's fine. So definitely you want to be speaking to that.
Excellent. Okay, good. And then we have no calendar, but all communications are coming from Sarah Crane directly for her nonprofit, the Howe Foundation. Nikki Davis says, great strategy for any company. As an outsider working with consumer brands, this translates to her world. Yeah, I agree. I think this just crosses any borders in terms of sectors that we all may work in. Some people have for-profit businesses as well as working for a nonprofit. So absolutely. Sarah Crane says they devoted some extra time to brain health seminars as this was all starting to unfold, and maybe devoted a little too much time to that. They'd love to salvage those. I think Sarah, one of the things I've learned is we all think people have seen it all just because we put it out there. There's no reason why you can't go back and say, hey, in case you missed it, our series on brain health is running again in whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. We get different audiences all the time, right? Nikki's nodding her head, Carrie's nodding. Yeah, so just keep doing that. Max is asking how soon we get this recording. Well, as soon as Tanaka gets it all wrapped up and puts it in the Google folder. Let's see, matching grants during this time. We'll just take one or two more questions. I know you guys are eager to get some answers. So what about matching funds opportunities, Dr. No? Is this a good time for that?
Yeah, so I'm glad that was brought up. I meant to cover it. So what the Motivational Edge in Miami has done, they actually got a $10,000 donation from a group of doctors, pediatricians this past week that I was involved with that, and they were super happy. They had another $5,000 coming in from an individual. That was 15. They're using that to actually go to their board for that $15,000 match. And so that's where the first $30,000 came in from, an internal campaign with their board and saying to their board members, this is the time to give. If you're going to give this year, this is the critical time more than ever to give. Plus, you can say we've got 100% board giving. This is the time to step up. And so match is going to be important to leverage that. One other concept I wanted to share that we talked about with Spady the other night is they're going to probably put together some of their top 5 donors that have given to them in recent years on a Zoom call. And they're going to talk to them about why they've supported Spady over the years and record it and then send that out to other folks. And it really is just a fun conversation.
I love that.
About why that they have been supporters, have been involved. And that too helps you stay relevant. It creates momentum. And I think that is and goodwill. And you can then hear them talk, with questions about now why the need is more urgent now for certain elements.
I love that. Love that. That is such a great idea. All right. I want to just give a little shout out to, so by the way, if you have a story like this, Liz, I don't know if you're comfortable with me sharing that story that you just sent me privately, but I do want to give a quick shout out to Horses Healing Hearts for sending me a mask, and it has horses on both sides, as you can see. Thank you so much, Liz. You're the best. I know Pam helped you out with some of your questions. And Banu, yes, by all means, thanks for coming. Please feel free to head out. I do want to just quickly then relate, and Sarah as well, if you've got to leave, that is no problem. I want to share a quick story that Liz shared with me, that they are meeting via Zoom with the kids in their participant group. The kids are able to write letters to the horses, and the staff writes back on behalf of the horse. And then they share these letters and pictures of the child with that horse on Facebook and MailChimp through email campaigns, which I just love that. That is fantastic. Yeah, absolutely great. So yeah, very, very creative. I think we all learn from all of these ideas because we think we've racked our brains, and then you get an idea and it puts a spin on something that maybe can take you down a path that you could be tapping into something really great that'll really speak to your donors and your audience. So Dr. No, thank you. I have some takeaways from that. Whew, ambiguity is the enemy. It needs to be all about specificity right now. Communications programs, funding, thinking about an impact fund for your organization. That 2-page needs assessment was the bomb. I love it. I want to steal it just the way it is and change out a name. No, I won't do that, but it really is amazing, Dr. No, thank you. The motivational edge needs blueprint. I mean, even just the language of blueprint, like call it something. That is so cool. I love that. So thank you very, very much. Those are just incredible, incredible suggestions, and so grateful to you for being here. I really, really always appreciate your insight, Dr. No. Thank you.
My pleasure. Keep being visionary. I have that on my shirt. Keep looking forward, everyone. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's your shirt, Dr. No. Let's see it. Come on now. There you go. Visionary. Yep. And I know you've worked with a lot of people that are here in our group today. So that's awesome. Thank you. I hope you all feel that our sessions get better and better. I certainly feel that way. So thank you all.